and Northern Ireland, but it will still be quite cool with that rain across the far northwest, a bit breezy here as well. We'll continue to see some of that patchy rain across the Highlands and the Northern Isles through this evening and overnight. A small chance of a shower this evening for Northern Ireland, but for most, a very pleasant, balmy summer's evening and a pretty warm night. Temperatures holding up in double figures in most places. The nights are going to get warmer still, as are the days. Come tomorrow, we're looking at temperatures, again, mid to high 20s across the southeast. Again, for most it is a sunny day, but yet again, western Scotland, the Northern Isles of Scotland, likely to see a bit of cloud. And also tomorrow, maybe a bit more cloud and some patchy rain trickling into Northern Ireland, maybe later on into southwest Scotland. So again, a little cooler here, but for most other places, temperatures a degree or so higher tomorrow, 29 across the southeast. The coasts will always be a little cooler. Temperatures likely to peak on Friday. This area of high pressure is edging away, allowing hot air to drift up from the south. This cold front will introduce cooler air further north, but in the south we could peak on Friday with temperatures at 34 Celsius. Bye for now.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. It's 10 o'clock and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner today on your TV, radio and online.
That's right, I am Patrick Christie's alter ego today and tomorrow. Thank you for having me here. It is Wednesday the 15th of June and today is our weekly special where we hand over the reins to you.
Yes, we've been asking you, our lovely viewers and listeners, to choose what we discussed today, and we've delivered, ladies and gentlemen.
That is right. You've sent in an eclectic mix of questions, but the most important part of our show is your views.
Yes, email them in at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we'll be reading your thoughts throughout the show. That's all coming up in just a moment, but before then, the news headlines.
Good morning. It's just after 10 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary has said she won't be deterred from sending asylum seekers to Rwanda, despite a last-minute cancellation of the first deportation flight last night. The plane, which was expected to carry up to 7 migrants, was stopped. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has expressed her surprise, actually, and disappointment, but said preparation for the next flight had already begun. Head of Immigration Services at Howard Kennedy, Antonia Tor, told GB News this is cause for the government to reassess its policy.
UK courts were effectively saying we're not going to comment on whether the policy is lawful or not. That is for the hearing in July. But in the interim, the Secretary of State can continue. And if it was ruled that the policy was unlawful, those who were removed to Rwanda could be returned back to the UK. What the European Court of Human Rights have basically done is short-circuits that a little bit to say, well, no, let's have that discussion first before we put people on a plane.
The European Union has launched 2 new legal challenges against the UK after the government published plans to unilaterally override the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Prime Minister has downplayed changes to the post-Brexit agreement, which will reduce checks on goods, as no big deal. Boris Johnson could also come under pressure when he faces MPs' questions for the first time since the new legislation was published. The Department for Work and Pensions says 8 million households will receive the first part of their cost of living payment on the 14th of July. A £326 instalment will be paid into the bank accounts of low-income households on benefits. A second portion of the £650 payment will follow in the autumn. Personal finance expert Laura Retty told GB News it would be better if the payments were smaller but more regular.
A lot of people really struggle to budget their money, and this payment, essentially it could land in your account and you could pay anything with it. You're not forced to use it towards your energy, you're not forced to use it towards your food. People need this money, so I'm sure that is what they're going to pay it or use it for. But I don't know whether 2 big lump sums like this is particularly helpful.
Russia has told Ukrainian forces holed up in a chemical plant in the eastern city of Severodonetsk to surrender. Ukraine says more than 500 civilians are trapped inside the Azot factory, where its forces have resisted weeks of Russian attacks. Much of the Severodonetsk, the final city in the eastern Donbas region, not under Russian control, has been reduced to ruins. Moscow has called this final defence senseless and vowed to evacuate the civilians through a humanitarian corridor. A second suspect has been arrested over the disappearances of British journalist Dom Phillips and Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira, who went missing in the Amazon. Police in Brazil say the suspect was the brother of the first suspect arrested. The Brazilian ambassador to the UK has apologised to Mr Phillips' family after incorrectly telling them a body had been found. Back here in the UK, pharmacists will be able to spot potential cancer cases as part of a new NHS trial. It's hoped that giving pharmacists more power to send patients for cancer scans and tests will help improve the speed of diagnosis for many. Hundreds in England will take part in the pilot scheme, and pharmacies will be invited to apply to be involved. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary will condemn poor leadership in the UK's health service as contagious at an NHS conference today. A major review into the NHS found evidence of poor behaviours, including discrimination, bullying and blame cultures. But the NHS Confederation has accused the government of management bashing to explain the problems in the service, which they put down to decades of austerity. Sajid Javid will set out his plan to tackle what he calls challenges later on today, and we will, of course, bring it to you here on GB News. Today is expected to be the hottest day of the year, with predicted highs of 28 degrees. The Met Office and UK Health Security Agency have issued a level 2 alert for large parts of southern and central England, as temperatures are expected to reach 34 degrees later this week. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to the point.
Good morning, the time is 10:06 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online.
That's right, it is Wednesday, which means one thing. This show is dedicated to the issues on your mind.
Yes, that's right, all week we've been asking you to tell us what you would like us to talk about today, and we've got some very interesting discussions lined up with some expert guests.
European Court of Human Rights has stopped the planned deportation flight to Rwanda. Many of you want to know why and what this means for the plan in the long term. Can we control our own borders? We will get to the bottom of it.
Yes, and what do you want to ask a government minister? What would your questions be? Because we'll be holding the government to account on your behalf. In about 20 minutes' time, we'll be speaking to that government ministers and asking them exactly what you want to ask. So contact us to the point at gbnews.uk and let us know.
And could we be heading for a second Scottish independence referendum? Or is this a distraction from the SNP's record in government? Well, after Nicola Sturgeon's speech on what's being called Indie Ref 2 yesterday, many of you have been asking what on earth Sturgeon is up to.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more as well across the programme. And you can get in touch in the usual way, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
So let's start with our first viewer and listener, Tony, who got in touch to say, how much longer will European institutions be interfering in UK policy? Parliament has the power to withdraw the UK from the European Court of Human Rights and should do so today.
Well, this is, of course, because the first UK flight to Rwanda with those asylum seekers was prevented from taking off just 30 minutes before it was due to depart.
That's right. There was a dramatic and late intervention from the European Court of Human Rights. It led to fresh challenges in the UK courts, and that stopped the plane.
Yes, just 30 minutes before. The flight is reported to have cost taxpayers £500,000, and that's not even including the legal fees. Well, originally 130 people were meant to be on the flight, but yesterday that was just down to 7.
So now let's get the latest from our reporter Jeff Moody at the Ministry of Defence, Boscombe Down in Amesbury, and our national reporter Paul Hawkins, who is outside the Home Office in London. Good morning, gentlemen. Let's go first to you, Jeff, if we can. The plane has now left the tarmac, but without the intended passengers. How on earth has this been allowed to happen?
Well, exactly. Apparently the plane should now be in Rwanda, but instead it's in Madrid, of all places. Yesterday, this place here was packed with reporters, with TV crews, with photographers, with long lenses, all trying to get that shot of the plane taking off. We saw the pilot come on board, do all of his checks. We saw the catering van go on board. We then saw the migrants themselves climb up the steps into the plane. And then half an hour before takeoff, suddenly the engines died. The lights went out on the runway. We were plunged into darkness and everybody went home. This morning, a sense of disbelief that this can happen, that a court in a foreign land can override Britain's highest court, the High Court, and override the British government's decisions, the British government's policies. Disbelief that that can happen. The Conservative government, in its last manifesto in December 2019, said they were going to look very closely at the European Convention of Human Rights to see whether it's fit for purpose. Remember, this is nothing to do with the EU. We're still very much a member of the European Court of Human Rights and the European Convention of Human Rights. We were one of the ones that helped to set the whole thing up in the first place. But the government promised, they pledged in this term to have a really good look at that to see whether it's still appropriate to carry on using that now that we are going our separate ways with Brexit. Calls this morning for them to examine that particularly closely to see what they can do, because this is certainly an embarrassment for the government, if nothing else.
Yes, well, thank you for that. And Paul, let's go to you. What's the latest development from the Home Office? Because this is quite an embarrassment for them, isn't it?
It is. Cynics would say perhaps it was always set up to achieve this kind of outcome. They knew what would happen given the controversial legalities around it. Priti Patel says that she's still going to press on. We're expecting a statement from her in the House of Commons later today. But as Jeff was just alluding to, if they are going to remain within the legal framework of the European Convention on Human Rights, and they're going to have to make changes to the Human Rights Act. Now, that's a piece of legislation that came into force in 2000 that essentially put the European Convention on Human Rights into British law. So instead of people having to go all the way to the court in Strasbourg to have their human rights enforced, they could do it through British courts. Now, what the Conservatives have said is that they want to make changes to it to loosen it up, and in doing so they may then be able to enact this policy of flying people to Rwanda to remain within the convention. Now, this ruling last night by the European Court of Human Rights, it didn't say the policy was illegal. Indeed, the ruling from the British courts they weren't ruling on the legality of the policy. That's for a judicial review next month. All they were simply saying was, the British courts were saying that we don't think there needs to be an injunction because we think you can still go ahead with this policy pending that judicial review. We think that people that are put on that plane will be treated in a safe, humane, legal way, a fair way when they're over there in Rwanda. But the European Court of Human Rights clearly taking into account the UN Refugees Agency's assessment that Rwanda is not a totally safe place, that we can't get assurances and guarantees that people who are sent there are going to be safe, and there's no legal mechanism to bring them back to the UK if the judicial review next month does indeed find that the policy is illegal. So the ruling last night from the European Court of Human Rights simply saying that we don't think the people that are sent there are going to be safe, and there's no way of getting them to come back. So something else to note, Mercy, is that was an interim ruling. It wasn't a final ruling, and that you only need to comply with final rulings from the European Court of Human Rights. And indeed, a former Supreme Court judge, Lord Sumption, has said that the article on complying with final judgments isn't incorporated into the Human Rights Act anyway. So there could even be a case that the UK government could go ahead with these flights to Rwanda, wouldn't need to make any changes to the Human Rights Act, and would still be complying with the convention. But as we say, there are lawyers poring over all this stuff now and trying to work out what is the best route forward for the government. Indeed, if it did have to make changes to the Human Rights Act, there would be knock-on implications for other agreements that it has, such as the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and the Trade and Cooperation Agreement that the UK has with the EU, that mentions the European Court of Human Rights in that. So changing compliance with that could have knock-on effects for other agreements. It's complicated, dry stuff, but it is really important.
And presumably, Paul, making lawyers in the meantime a huge amount of money while they all wrangle about this. Now, judicial reviews is a legal process whereby somebody can question a government's decision. It's a really fundamental part of our democracy and our judicial system, isn't it? But they can take a really long time. Do we have any idea about the timescale that might be involved whilst this judicial review is contemplated and pushed to completion?
It won't start till next month, and it could take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. They're going to look at the policy in the whole. They're not just going to look at the bare facts and look at one flight leaving to Rwanda, which has been the case for the last few days and on Friday. They're going to look at the whole policy in the round and work out, is it legally compliant, and that will take 6 to 8 weeks. So that is the point at which we'll find out whether the government can proceed any further.
Well, Paul, thank you for that. I'm sure you'll bring us further updates, and if indeed there are any, I'm sure there will be today. Thank you, Paul. Well, also joining us now for some expert analysis is Kevin Saunders, the former Chief Immigration Officer for the UK Border Force at Calais. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Look, the Rwanda flight, it was not to be, clearly 30 minutes before it has been halted. What is your opinion on this ECHR interim judgment?
Well, it was an absolute disaster, wasn't it? I'm astonished. I really am astonished. The highest court in the land said that it was quite acceptable to send these people to Rwanda in the interim on an interim basis. If, when they had the review, it turned out that what the government had done was illegal, then they would have had to be brought back. I still can't see any problem with that whatsoever. After all, the leader in the at the Court of Appeal was Lord Justice Singh, who is a very eminent legal mind. He was actually was with Sherry Blair in the Matrix Chambers, which took a lot of cases against the government. So if Lord Justice Singh says it's okay, it's okay in my book.
But isn't it the case, you know, we do have to emphasise again that the ECHR is separate from the EU and the ECJ, European Court of Justice. This convention, we were the first country, the first member state to sign this convention in 1951. So actually, you know, we do have a long history of abiding to this convention. Couldn't you argue then that look, yes, we don't like this particular judgment, but we have been a long-standing member, and just because we don't like it, we can't just, you know, leave the convention?
Right. Well, the convention, you're quite right, was set up after the Second World War, and it was designed to help 2 million refugees and displaced people following the end of the war. We now have 80 million. I'm afraid it's long overdue to be revised because it clearly isn't working anymore.
Kevin, you were the chief officer, the border force officer. So you are the man at the front line who sees these people get off boats and you understand who they are. If this is not the solution, what else can the government do? What should they be doing in your professional experience?
OK, I was a chief immigration. I wasn't the only one. There are others. But certainly I was in France for 16 years and lived there as well. So I do know a little bit about it all. I'm afraid that the figures that are constantly thrown at us are blatantly wrong. There are probably 70% of the people are young, fit men that come off the boats, and they're not asylum seekers. I actually spoke to them. I've spoken to a lot of them, and they all tell me the same thing. They're coming to the UK because they want a better life. It's not political, it's they want a better life. The trouble is, Bev, that these people are coached by the traffickers and people on the other side to tell us what we want to hear. They will tell us that tell the immigration people that you're a Christian living in a Muslim country, that sort of thing, and that will get you your ticket to remain in the UK. So I'm afraid it's not as straightforward as everybody says.
Yeah, it's definitely not straightforward, that's for sure. We can speak about it for much longer, but we do have to leave it there. Thank you, Kevin Saunders there, who's Chief Immigration Officer, was Chief Immigration Officer for the UK Border Force at Calais. But now, after the break, we'll be speaking to the Minister for Pensions and Financial Inclusion, Guy Opperman. We'll be putting some of your questions to him and getting some reaction on the latest news today. Join us after this weather.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Things are hotting up day on day. A warmer day today compared to yesterday. Just a cautionary note, UV levels and grass pollen levels will once again be high. And it's not hot and sunny everywhere. These weather fronts just again pushing into the far northwest. So at times today, the Highlands of Scotland, the Northern and the Western Isles will see some outbreaks of rain. There's a small chance of a shower over Northern Ireland too, but generally it's dry and sunny and a bit warmer than yesterday. Temperatures ticking up. Some cloud will develop as we go through the day, but still, as I say, most of us just seeing more of that strong sunshine. And it will lift those temperatures higher than yesterday's into the mid-20s, even the high 20s across the southeast. A warmer day for eastern and southern Scotland as well, and Northern Ireland. But it will still be quite cool with that rain across the far northwest, a bit breezy here as well. We'll continue to see some of that patchy rain across the Highlands and the Northern Isles through this evening and overnight. A small chance of a shower this evening for Northern Ireland, but for most, a very pleasant, balmy summer's evening and a pretty warm night. Temperatures holding up in double figures in most places. The nights are going to get warmer still, as are the days. Come tomorrow, we're looking at temperatures, again, mid to high 20s across the southeast. Again, for most it is a sunny day, but yet again, Western Scotland, the Northern Isles of Scotland, likely to see a bit of cloud. And also tomorrow, maybe a bit more cloud and some patchy rain trickling into Northern Ireland, maybe later on into southwest Scotland. So again, a little cooler here, but for most other places, temperatures a degree or so higher tomorrow, 29 across the southeast. The coasts will always be a little cooler. Temperatures likely to peak on Friday. This area of high pressure is edging away, allowing
hot air to drift up from the south. This cold front will introduce cooler air further north, but in the south we could peak on Friday with temperatures at 34 Celsius. Bye for now.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:23 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on GB News. I do have to say you're much more glamorous than Patrick, my usual co-host.
I got this dress out of his wardrobe. I don't think he'll mind, do you?
No,
His
or you could
secret
just
wardrobe.
identify as Patrick for today, I think.
That would lead to a very strange day for me. But I'm here until I am Patrick Christie until 12 o'clock this morning, and the same tomorrow as well. While he's covering for Mark Dolan this week, isn't he? This evening,
he is. He's putting in the hours, and we of course are live on your TV, online, and radio.
For Dan Wootton, he's covering for Dan because Dan's having a holiday.
9 p.m.
So it's just the girls. I'm afraid you're stuck with the girls for today.
Yes, well, we just want to bring you some news that's coming out of the European Union in the last few moments. Speaking a short time ago, the EU Commissioner in charge of Brexit negotiations, Maros Sefcovic, has said that the EU will take a new legal action against the UK government over the plan to scrap parts of the post-Brexit deal for Northern Ireland. Let's take a look at this.
Let there be no doubt. There is no legal nor political justification whatsoever for unilaterally changing an international agreement. Opening the door to unilaterally changing an international agreement is a breach of international law as well. So let's call a spade a spade. This is illegal. The UK bill is extremely damaging to mutual trust and respect between the EU and the UK. It has created deep uncertainty and casts a shadow over our overall cooperation. All at the time when respect for international agreements has never been more important. That is why the Commission has today decided to take legal action against the United Kingdom for not complying with significant parts of the Protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland.
Well, the Commissioner there, Maros Sefcovic, speaking not long ago. Well, look, let's go straight to Guy Opperman, MP, who is Minister for Pensions and Financial Inclusion. We're going to be putting some of your questions to him. Guy, thank you so much for joining us on what looks like a very sunny morning out there. Look, let's first get your reaction
It's a gorgeous morning. It's a bit high in pollen.
Yes, it is. I wish I was there, actually. But let's get stuck into what took place yesterday, because that will be what a lot of people are waking up to this morning. This news that we didn't, that the Rwanda flight was basically cancelled half an hour before because of the European Court of Human Rights. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think, like everybody, I'm disappointed that the stated policy of the UK government is not able to proceed. But I think it's a temporary setback. I don't believe it is the end of the matter. Effectively, as I understand the ECHR decision, it is a decision for the UK courts, who have backed the government's position, to go away and look at this in a bit more detail. And I believe that the Home Office will be continuing this in due course.
Rating is this for MPs today? One of our viewers, Michael, has got in touch. He said if the European Court of Human Rights can interfere with where we send migrants and the European Commission can interfere with Northern Ireland Protocol, then what exactly is our government governing?
Well, I think the reality of the situation is that we are a member of the ECHR. That is something that, as I understand, we intend to continue. But at the same stage that they accept that the UK courts do have primacy. And ultimately, it is going to be for the UK courts to decide this.
I'm sorry. We're struggling just to hear you a little bit. Your audio to us is a little bit quiet, Guy. What do you think the time frame? I was asking our reporter who was there at the Ministry of Defence this morning about time frame that we might be looking at, because I know for a fact that our viewers are feeling very frustrated that we have an immigration problem which is rumbling on. There doesn't seem to be any sign of a solution. And at what point does the government say, you know, it is not worth us being in the European Court of Human Rights? We're going to leave that so that we can make these decisions for our own country.
So listen, I think that it is unquestionably the case that the UK government are determined to press ahead with this. I think the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary have been very clear that the Rwandan agreement is something that they do believe in and are going to continue with. But at the same stage, we've got to take due account of there is a legal process. I think this is the start of a process. Bear in mind, this is only announced barely a month ago. This is the first attempt. There are various processes that we've got to go through. I think that this is, a marathon, not a sprint, to fix a problem.
And very lastly, just on that particular issue, before we move on to the cost of living, we did have a viewer and listener, Kenneth, say, why can't MPs not ever answer a simple question with a simple answer? So I do want to ask you this simple question. Where does the government want to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights?
It is not my understanding that we want to do that.
There you go. I think that classifies as simple answers, so thank you. Jackie's also got in... Well, yeah, to an extent. I'll accept it, though. Jackie has got in touch and says she's really disappointed we've wasted billions on PPE. Should it not be sent back for a full refund? Of course, we're in a cost of living crisis, and I know you want to talk a little bit about what the government's doing to help on that. But she says, why do we waste so much taxpayers' money? Maybe the government would be able to help more with the cost of living if these billions of pounds were not wasted so often.
Well, I think, listen, the government has announced a £37 billion package of support to address the cost of living, whether that's an increase of £300 to the winter fuel payment, £650 that will be starting in July the 16th to those who are means tested benefit, that's universal credit, pension credit, things like that, and also huge amounts of support with the household living fund, household support fund, I should say. So there is a lot of money that is going from the government, from taxpayers, to support the most vulnerable. That, I think, is really, really important.
Sorry, we are struggling with the audio a little bit here at the moment. We have another question here from Andy, who's saying, what is the point of Brexit? A lot of our viewers were in support of Brexit, if we still don't control our border.
Well, I think we do control these things, and we are making policies that would simply not have been possible if we'd stayed within the European Union. That's a practical reality of the Rwandan agreement. That would not have been possible within the European Union.
Well, Guy, thank you for answering our viewers and listeners' questions, not really our questions. Please come back again. And yes, we'd be grateful to have you on again, because obviously the cost of living will keep rumbling on. Guy Opperman there. Well, look, let us know what you made of his answers. Were they straight enough for you? Get in touch, GBViews at GBNews.uk. Well, after the break, Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon makes a push for a second Scottish independence referendum. Is this likely to happen, or is this just a distraction from her record? But before that, a look at this morning's news.
It's 10:31. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Here's the latest. The European Union has launched 2 legal proceedings against the UK after the government published legislation allowing ministers to override the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Prime Minister has downplayed the changes as not a big deal, but EU Commission Vice President Marcos Šefčovič says it's illegal and damages the trust between the EU and the UK.
There is no legal nor political justification whatsoever for unilaterally changing an international agreement. Opening the door to unilaterally changing an international agreement is a breach of international law as well. So let's call a spade a spade. This is illegal.
The Home Secretary has said she won't be deterred from sending asylum seekers to Rwanda, despite a last-minute cancellation of the first deportation flight last night. The plane, which was expected to carry up to 7 migrants, was stopped when the European Court of Human Rights issued injunctions with minutes to spare. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has expressed her surprise and disappointment, but said preparation for the next flight has already begun. The Department for Work and Pensions says 8 million households will receive the first part of their cost of living payment on the 14th of July. A £326 instalment will be paid into the bank accounts of low-income households who are on benefits. A second portion of the £650 payment will follow in the autumn. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.209 to the dollar. The pound is 1.152 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,508.67 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping it.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. You're watching To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and joined today by the wonderful, beautiful Bev Turner. I don't say that about Patrick. So, but we're going to speak about, it's Wednesday today, of course, so we're going to talk about the views you want to talk about. We've been asking you to get in touch with lots of topics for us to discuss, so everything we're talking about today is from you.
That's right, including Jackie, who has said, how about talking about Nicola Sturgeon's obsession with a Scottish referendum? She does nothing for any of the other issues facing ordinary Scottish people.
Yes, well, yesterday, Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon declared there was an indisputable mandate, that was her words, for a second referendum on the Scottish independence question. She revealed the first in a series of new policy papers, which she says will make the case in favour of Scottish independence.
Now, Scottish Labour leader Anna Sawar accused the First Minister of wanting to focus on division to distract from her own failures.
Yes, well, joining us now is Donald Cameron, who's member of the Scottish Parliament. Good morning. Look, isn't this completely misjudged, this wrong time to announce a Scottish referendum? Isn't it the case that Scotland gets much more from the UK than they give in terms of revenues, and they pretty much benefit hugely from being in the UK?
Good morning, and I completely agree. It is absolutely misjudged and frankly staggering that Nicola Sturgeon thinks now is the appropriate time to hold another divisive independence referendum. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. We have war in Ukraine, and there are lots of domestic issues in Scotland, such as the NHS backlog, closing the attainment gap in education, that need to be addressed. And it's frankly staggering that the SNP think it's the right time to start another constitutional wrangle over the future of Scotland in the UK. And as you said, Scotland benefits hugely from being part of the Union. So we're completely opposed to this idea to hold another divisive referendum and just want the SNP to concentrate on the day job.
Nicola Sturgeon has chosen now. The last time this referendum was held in 2014, 53%, I think it was, of Scottish people wanted to remain as part of the UK. Why now do you think she's chosen to signal this potentially historic change?
Well, I think she wants to please the base of the SNP who support this. But frankly, as you've said, in 2014, Scotland made a decision, and that decision was a conclusive decision. It was 55% to 45%, and the decision was to stay in the United Kingdom. And we were told at the time that was once in a generation. And frankly, to try and hold another referendum a mere 8 years later is just irresponsible and reckless.
I do want to ask you, though, isn't it one of the case that one of the reasons she's perhaps chosen this time is because she can see a Conservative Party in complete disarray with lots of infighting at the moment, and she's perhaps seizing on that opportunity of a chaotic party with a Prime Minister who doesn't enjoy full support from his party to launch this referendum proposal?
Well, I think she does not believe in the United Kingdom. She doesn't believe in the Union, and any opportunity that she senses, she will try and take. I mean, I think the Union is bigger than one party. It's bigger than one person. Prime ministers come, prime ministers go, and frankly, the arguments for the Union, I think, are much stronger than simply about what party's in power and the state of that party. But we go back to a question of priorities. How can it be a priority at this very moment in time when families are struggling with their energy bills? We have a war in Ukraine. We have inflation. How can it be a priority to try and divide, to try and break up the United Kingdom all over again and plunge Scotland into another really polarised and bitter debate about independence? It's just irresponsible.
feels opportunistic, Donald, does it not? It feels very much like Nicola Sturgeon, which is what Nicola Sturgeon is good at. She's a very good politician, like her or hate her. She's very strategic about these things. She has some big constitutional legal hoops to jump through, doesn't she, anyway, if she's going to enact this? So what is the percentage probability that she will be allowed to hold this referendum at all?
Well, I don't know what percentage chance there is of holding it, but there are, it's absolutely correct to say there are legal issues around this, because a referendum is what's called reserved to the United Kingdom Parliament. It's a matter for the United Kingdom Parliament to agree to a referendum, and she requires that sort of consent to be given, and to plough ahead with a wildcat referendum or kind of illegal referendum would be the height of recklessness, in my view, and completely contrary to what everything that she said about this beforehand. But I come back to priorities and what we should be concentrating in Scotland at the moment. We should be concentrating on things like the NHS, getting that back up and running after the pandemic. We should be concentrating on trying to revive the economy. All these things, the day job, is what she should be focused on. And this referendum plan is a distraction. It's a deflection from her record and for what she should be trying to do. And frankly, the people of Scotland will see through this.
Well, Donald Cameron, thank you so much for joining us and giving your opinion on that member of the Scottish Parliament for the Scottish Conservative Party there. Well, joining us now in the studio is GB News' political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, what's your take on this? And I'd really quite like to focus initially on the constitutional aspect, because there's this section 30 order that basically allows, it's the UK, it can be triggered to let the UK government hand over some temporary power to Scotland in matters that would usually be reserved for the UK government, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you can correct me. How can she do it without doing that?
Well, frankly, she can't. The Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government have several powers devolved to them, wide-ranging powers, whether it's economic powers or indeed health or education, lots of areas where the Scottish Government has control. One area they don't have control is the Constitution. That's a reserved power for the United Kingdom Parliament, the United Kingdom Government. Of course, Scotland makes up a part of that Parliament. They send representatives to the UK Parliament, but when it comes to constitutional matters, the UK Parliament is sovereign in this country, and that's why one of those orders was agreed to between Alex Salmond and David Cameron back in 2012. In fact, it was really interesting looking at the terms of that agreement, what Alex Salmond demanded of the UK government. The UK government gave him just about everything to try and make this the most decisive referendum it could possibly be. The franchise was lowered so that 16-year-olds could vote. The campaign was run over 2 long years so that the independence groups could have the longest time to make their case. On every single issue, the UK government gave the Scottish nationalists what they wanted so that this would be a very decisive referendum, so that no one could challenge the result after it was delivered. Well, only a few years later, and that's exactly what's happened.
Does it for you, Tom? Because it does for me a little bit. I'm now looking back at Nicola Sturgeon's behaviour, particularly throughout the pandemic and more recently, and I'm seeing it now through the prism of the fact that she had this in her sights all along, maybe, to launch this summer-autumn 2022. Do you think that's maybe played a part in some of her decisions, the fact that they had mask mandates for so much longer, the fact that they were off school longer, you know, and she was very much painting herself as this matriarch. I will look after you. I will keep you safe, when, you know, the British government, the English government down there are not doing a terribly good job of doing that for you, the British government.
That was certainly her argument throughout the pandemic, and it's interesting. She continued with daily press conferences broadcast on media in Scotland, and it did seem that she was wanting to be seen to be very present and very forward when it came to COVID policy. And actually, strangely, that was quite popular for her, and that was the sort of the peak of the independence sentiment within the Scottish people was around 2020, when, or late 2020, I should say, when people felt that things were pretty scary and people wanted clear leadership. She's quite a good communicator, and that was the high watermark of Scottish separatism sentiment. However, it's interesting. as we've emerged from the pandemic, as those sort of rules have lapsed, as we've moved back to a sense of normality in the country, in all parts of the United Kingdom, it's interesting that the sentiment of favourability towards breaking up the United Kingdom has ebbed away. It's looking at these polls, we can see that those in favour of the Union in Scotland are now consistently and significantly ahead. So it's interesting that Nicola Sturgeon is now pushing for this at this moment in time. Maybe she thinks that much longer and independent sentiment will ebb even further, or perhaps there are some internal dynamics at play here within the SNP. Nicola Sturgeon recently became the longest-serving First Minister that Scotland has ever had. There are conversations now about who may succeed her, and indeed she has made independence a core part of her political persona. If she looked like she was kicking it down the road much longer, perhaps there'd be some sort of coup attempt, some sort of leadership challenge.
Yeah, and Tom, can I just ask you one final question? I have a stat here. In 2020, 2021, that tax year, Scotland accounted for 7.9% of tax raised across the UK, but 9.1% of all public spending. How does Nicola Sturgeon intend to make up the gap between what Scotland receives from the UK government via the Barnett formula, and what Scotland sort of give back to the UK, the rest of the UK in revenues?
It's a really interesting question, because it used to have a relatively easy, although contested answer from Scottish nationalists, which was oil. And the whole Scottish independence case was predicated upon huge oil and gas extraction in the North Sea and upon the idea that United Kingdom debt wouldn't be divided equally between Scotland and the rest of the UK were Scotland to break away. Now, on those two issues, the facts seem to have shifted against the Scottish nationalists' agenda, because, number one, the SNP, in coalition with the Green Party, as they are in Scotland, are saying no new oil exploration. They don't even want to get the stuff out of the ground, let alone calculate how much that might make in revenue. But also, Scotland would take on significant debt were it to become an independent country. It would become one of the most indebted countries in Europe. There are some real financial issues there. And finally, of course, if you're going to deal with debt, if you're going to run an economy, you need to know what currency are you going to use. If they want to rejoin the European Union, as the Scottish nationalists do want to do, they need any new country joining the EU has to, by law, take on the euro. So would Scotland use the euro? Or would they seek an associate member status of the European Union and keep the pound, in which case the Bank of England would be controlling their monetary policy? It would be a funny sort of independence.
The implications of this are so enormous. If she does hold a referendum, and if Scotland does choose to leave, and then Scotland rejoins the EU, we're looking at the landscape, the political landscape of this country changing forever, Tom, aren't we?
You think the arguments over the Northern Ireland border are tricky. Imagine the arguments over the England-Scotland border.
Gosh.
About 60% of Scotland's trade is with the rest of the United Kingdom. Only around 20% of Scotland's trade is with the European Union. If they prioritise a tiny market for them over a big market, that has huge economic implications, but also the idea of whether or not there can be a free border, a common travel area. Will you need to stop for border checks between England and Scotland? There are some real big unresolved questions there, which I don't think have even started to be explored in this discussion.
No, not at all.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, for being as clear and concise and very informative as usual. Thank you, Tom, there, Tom, our political correspondent. What do you make of all this, Bev? Because I am kind of stuck, because on one hand, you know, I do believe in independence, so to speak. I believe in states' own right to decide whether they should be independent. But we're not talking about different states here. It's nations, aren't we? We're talking about breaking up a country rather than leaving some kind of political union. So I am kind of stuck on whether, you know, Scotland has a necessary right, so to speak.
You know what, maybe it's just the arrogance of the English, right? But this is the kind of thing that I don't lie awake at night thinking about until Nicola Sturgeon comes on the telly and says, I'd quite like us to break away from the rest of Great Britain. And then I realise how strongly I do feel about remaining as a united kingdom. I would hate to see Scotland cast adrift. So I I think we all need to be invested in this. We all need to know how we feel about it. And in fact, we've had a message from somebody who's emailed Patricia to say, what about Scots living in England? We are born, we have parentage, we have heritage. We need a right to vote in that referendum if it affects our country of birth. It's a good point, Patricia, and one of many that we will be talking about. I mean, read the room, Nicola Sturgeon. Read the room. We haven't got the headspace for this at the moment.
Yeah, certainly not. It did feel very self-indulgent announcing that yesterday, didn't it? But now let's move on to something else. We've spoken about, you know, who runs the country. We've spoken about Scotland's right, who gets the right to leave the UK. Now, who gets the rights to the road? Because our government, national or local, ignoring the concerns of drivers at the expense of cyclists. Because Chris got in touch to say, why are councils spending large amounts of money creating cycle lanes when only a small percentage of cyclists use them?
So are cyclists privileged at the expense of drivers who are now increasingly taxed off the road? I certainly think so. What do you think? Let us know, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Yes, well, Alex Raha, spokesperson for Stop Killing Cyclists, joins us now in the studio. Thanks so much for joining us. Just tell us a bit about what your organisation, Stop Killing Cyclists, is all about, firstly.
So Stop Killing Cyclists was created back in 2013 when 6 cyclists were killed on London's roads within a 2-week period. Stop Killing Cyclists then arranged a number of direct action protests, which some people refer to as die-ins, where we would lie down in the road at a particular junction, in this particular case at Transport for London's headquarters, calling for them to make the roads safer for people who wanted to choose to ride a bike.
So, Alex, I have a dog in this fight because my ex-husband actually sustained a very, very serious head injury when he got knocked off his bike in 2010. You may be familiar with that. He was a sportsman, James Cracknell. Everybody always said to me, you must be frightened when he goes and does these crazy, dangerous things. And I used to say, no, I'm frightened when he gets on his bike and goes out of the front door. However, I'm also a car driver and I'm not a big fan of bikes. You would not get me on a bicycle in London. A lot of these policies suit, and I mean extra cycle lanes, etc., slowing down the traffic. Do you know who they suit, Alex? They suit men on their bikes, and they are terrible for mothers trying to get 3 kids. I know that's sexist. I realise I'm drawing a terrible sexist assumption there, stereotype. When I've got to get the kids to pick them up from school, to go via the supermarket, to take 2 to swimming clubs, to take 1 to netball club, so that my children are fit and active, how can you justify cycle lanes?
So I would argue I am a father. I have a 3-year-old son. I also drive in central London, probably do about 6,000 miles of driving and 3,000 miles of cycle commuting. At the end of the day, everyone wants to get where they want to get to safely. I can say from driving...
quite quickly?
Well, as quickly as possible. But at the same time, we're facing a climate emergency. The government has decided in that to start spending more money on forms of active travel. Yes, it's a lot of money, but I think it's important to look at the facts and say £30 billion on roads, £2 billion on walking and cycling.
But what are we supposed to do? Genuinely, how am I meant to pick up my children from school, go to the supermarket, take them to their activities to keep them fit and healthy and well? Right now, when I'm doing that, I'm not that bothered about the climate in 100 years' time.
And when you're idling on the road, you're actually...
And all the roads around where I live are traffic jams, bumper to bumper, because of the cycle restrictions.
And there are a lot of people who are still choosing to make those journeys in cars when
it's not a choice.
Reality is...
I don't have a choice, Alex. That's the point. I don't have a choice.
Well, I would argue that you do.
What? Go on, then.
Okay.
How do I get 3 kids from school on the back of a bike with the shopping and the trips to the sports?
On our streets, no road closures, no cycle lanes. I still choose to do my nursery run in the morning using an electric cargo bike. Why? Because it's cheaper. You'll happily report about the cost of living crisis on this channel for however many more hours it is. Cost per mile of running cargo bike runs at less than a penny.
I can't get 3 children on the back of a bike.
I don't see any reason why you couldn't do it in a cargo bike. That's what we have.
One of them is...
in the front.
They're enormous. enormous. When they were little, we had a cargo bike. You can imagine my ex-husband, that was the first thing he did. He lost his licence because of his head injury. We got a cargo bike. But what do we do with teenagers? What do we do with 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds? And like I say, they've always got kit, they've got violins, they've got
Of course.
hockey sticks.
And what you're highlighting is that as things currently stand, those roads are not safe for those kids to use any other mode of transport other than you doing the school run or the taxi run, as a lot of parents call it, in that particular way.
But we don't have time. It's not the safety. I couldn't possibly do all the things I need to do in my car.
Well, if you're doing that run, I can completely understand. But if you're getting your teenage kids to cycle themselves to their violin lesson or their orchestra rehearsal or their football
They
club,
can't do that at 11. They can't do that at 11 and 12 and 13.
We've seen that in other countries. So I would argue that it is very, very possible, and there's no difference between a child being able to do that in another country, like Denmark, Copenhagen. We talk about Holland a lot, but there is
no way, I can tell you now, Alex. And listen, I love the fact that it's good for you. Cycling is exercise. I like the fact that it's not polluting our roads. I get all that. But from a fitness point of view, I particularly buy into the concept we should be cycling more. But it is impossible to solve while people have to live their normal, real lives. I am not prepared to put my 11-year-old on a bike to cycle 4 miles to the swimming club in order to save the planet in 100 years' time. I can't do it, Alex.
So as things stand, about 80% of journeys are less than 2 miles in length. On a bicycle, for most people...
In London, or you mean across the country?
So as things stand, it is very possible for a number of those journeys to be converted to another mode. A 2-mile cycle, for most people, will probably take about 15 minutes, maybe less for some other people. More people who choose to do that, that will mean less vehicles on the road. That will mean the people who need to use the roads, for whatever purpose that is, whether it's deliveries, whether it's because they're blue badge holders, whether it's because there are parents who have to do what you've just described. Yeah. But the point is, there are a lot of people who are currently the single person in a vehicle and could be making those journeys but are choosing not to. Why? Because they think that the roads where they live, it's not just in London, are not safe enough to ride a bicycle on. That's why Stop Killing Cyclists have said £6 billion over five years is enough, but...
Well, look, I could listen to you go back and forth on this all day. Very civil, of course. But Alex, thank you so much for coming in and putting your case across. I do have to say, looking at our inbox, there's not much sympathy for your argument. Lots of people agree.
We definitely agree that it's a terrible idea to kill cyclists. Yes. We definitely agree on that. And I would love people to drive more carefully around bikes.
Join us in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with Bev Turner and me, Mercy Moroki, on your TV, radio and online. We're here with you until midday, so for another hour with lots to discuss and expert guests.
Now, make sure you get in touch with your views, as usual, on gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those throughout the show. But first, it is time for the latest news with Tamsin.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 11 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The European Union has launched 2 new legal challenges against the UK after the government published plans to unilaterally override the Northern Ireland Protocol. Brussels says if Britain doesn't respond within 2 months, they could be taken to the European Court of Justice. The Prime Minister has downplayed the changes as no big deal and says they protect the Good Friday Agreement. EU Commission Vice President Markos Šefčovič says it's illegal and damages trust between the EU and the UK.
There is no legal nor political justification whatsoever for unilaterally changing an international agreement. Opening the door to unilaterally changing an international agreement is a breach of international law as well. So let's call a spade a spade. This is illegal.
The Home Secretary has said she won't be deterred from sending asylum seekers to Rwanda despite a last-minute cancellation of the first deportation flight last night. The plane, which was expected to carry up to 7 migrants, was stopped when the European Court of Human Rights issued injunctions with minutes to spare. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has expressed her surprise and disappointment, but said preparation for the next flight has already begun. Head of Immigration Services at Howard Kennedy, Antonia Tor, told GB News this is cause for the government to reassess its policy.
UK courts were effectively saying we're not going to comment on whether the policy is lawful or not. That is for the hearing in July. But in the interim, the Secretary of State can continue. And if it was ruled that the policy was unlawful, those who were removed to Rwanda could be returned back to the UK. What the European Court of Human Rights have basically done is short-circuits that a little bit to say, well, no, let's have that discussion first before we put people on a plane.
The Department for Work and Pensions says 8 million households will receive the first part of their cost of living payment on the 14th of July. A £326 instalment will be paid into the bank accounts of low-income households on benefits. A second portion of the £650 payment will follow in the autumn. Personal finance expert Laura Retty says it would be better if the payments were smaller but more regular.
A lot of people really struggle to budget their money, and this payment, essentially it could land in your account and you could pay anything with it. You're not forced to use it towards your energy, you're not forced to use it towards your food. People need this money, so I'm sure that is what they're going to pay it or use it for. But I don't know whether 2 big lump sums like this is particularly helpful.
Russia has told Ukrainian forces holed up in a chemical plant in the eastern city of Severodonetsk to surrender. Ukraine says more than 500 civilians are trapped inside the Azot factory, where its forces have resisted weeks of Russian attacks. Much of Severodonetsk, the final city in the eastern Donbas region not under Russian control, has been reduced to ruins. Moscow has called this final defence senseless and vowed to evacuate civilians through a humanitarian corridor. A second suspect has been arrested over the disappearances of British journalist Dom Phillips and Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira, who went missing in the Amazon. Police in Brazil say the suspect is the brother of the first man arrested. The Brazilian ambassador to the UK has apologised to Mr Phillips' family after incorrectly telling them a body had been found. Here in the UK, pharmacists will be able to spot potential cancer cases as part of a new NHS trial. It's hoped that giving pharmacists more power to send patients for cancer scans and tests will help improve the speed of diagnosis for many. Hundreds in England will take part in the pilot scheme, and pharmacies will be invited to apply to become involved. Now, today is expected to be the hottest day of the year, with predicted highs of 28 degrees. The Met Office and UK Health Security Agency have issued a level 2 alert for large parts of southern and central England, as temperatures are expected to reach 34 degrees later this week. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Bev and Mercy.
Good morning, it's 10:05 and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online. And it's Wednesday, which means this show is all about you and what you want us to cover. So here are some topics that mattered to you this week.
Now, many of you were outraged, and I'm with you, that a report said that some 5-year-olds are starting school not able to say their own name. They can't use the toilet or even drink from a cup by themselves. We're going to be asking 2 education experts how this has happened to British children and what needs to be done to stop it.
I have some quite strong views about that, so it should be interesting. And a number of you wanted us to discuss the controversial topic of assisted dying or euthanasia. Is it right? Is it moral? And should it actually be legalised in this country? Some of you actually think so. So we'll debate this topic later on in the hour.
And finally, as the financial crisis continues to bite at the heels of many Brits, we'll look at what going back to work as an older worker looks like and whether there is sufficient help out there for those wanting to retrain or get back into the workforce.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more as well over the next hour. And you can get in touch with your views. Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll read as many as we can.
Some of your views here, actually. Bernard has got in touch about our cycling topic. If cyclists paid road tax and insurance the same as car owners, then they can have the same rights. I felt a bit sorry for Alex. I wasn't sure whether our cycling expert was going to have an easy ride.
Yeah, we spoke to Alex Raha there from Stop Killing Cyclists a bit earlier. And to be fair, he could not answer your question about how mothers who have multiple kids, like you were saying you have 3 kids, and sometimes you have to ferry them off to clubs and things and go shopping, and you have to carry lots of things. How are you meant to do that on a bike?
I don't want to live a little life where I can't go more than 2 miles from my front door. I'm sorry, that's not a vision of the future that I buy into.
Well, that's many people will be in your position, of course.
A lot of you agreeing with me.
Yes, we also have some views, of course, on Rwanda. The flight that was set to take off yesterday obviously did not take off. Jenny here says, what kind of welcome will the people of Rwanda give, given our press is running down of their country? And I think that's really interesting, because what I've seen over the last few weeks since this policy was announced were predominantly people from the left, just completely, for some reason, bashing Rwanda. And I've just found it, disingenuous, a bit distasteful a lot of the time, because I know the only reason they've become so hostile towards Rwanda is because the Conservative government are doing a deal with them. And I just think, Rwanda, they're making out Rwanda to be this kind of Guantanamo Bay style place where these people are going to go and be locked in their cells by the ankles, sort of thing.
It's not that.
Yeah.
And it is quite, it's sort of stereotypical, isn't it? Because we think of Rwanda, of course, they've had terrible political upheaval in the last 20 years. Rwanda is a World Economic Forum. It is the centre for the 4th Industrial Revolution. Just think about that. It is the technological hub. So they are receiving a lot of funding for a lot of projects. They need young men to go there and work. We saw the pictures yesterday on the press of the hotels that these immigrants are going to be provided with. It didn't look that bad, I can't lie. It looked all right. We aren't sending them to the front line of war. That's kind of where they've come from. And I know we have to be respectful. I know every individual human story will be different. But I think the Border Force, our guy earlier from the Border Force officer, his take on it was, there are a lot of economic migrants and we do have to do something.
Yes, indeed. Well, keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But our first topic this hour that you've sent in, we're going to be looking at a report that some of you found completely unbelievable and outrageous, and rightly so. One email was sent in by GB viewer and listener Laura, who says, I was totally shocked at new reports saying school-age children have dummies, can't talk properly and can't use the toilets. This should get a reaction.
I couldn't agree more, Laura. She's discussing a report from the Times Education Commission due to be published in full this week, which says that some children are arriving at school lacking the essential skills in which to learn, wasting teachers' time by making them focus on basic care instead of literacy or numeracy.
As well, dozens of experts gave evidence that 4- and 5-year-olds, which are sort of reception age, year 1 age, are joining school unable to say their own name, drink from cups, eat with cutlery, or even go to the toilet by themselves. Some of them turning up having to wear nappies, and staff are having to change those nappies, can you believe, during school time in some schools.
Amazing. So joining us now are Leon Hadey, former head teacher and founder and CEO of education training company Guide Education, and Alice Wilcox, the head of education policy at the Centre for Social Justice. Good morning to you both. If I can come to you first, Alex, what does this surprise you, and what can we blame this on?
Unfortunately, this doesn't really surprise me. So we found out that about 50% of children are now starting school really not ready to learn. And that's resulting in children turning up in nappies, as you've reported, children not being able to say their own name. But this is a massive problem made worse by the pandemic. It was a problem before then. Officials were estimating that 1 in 3 kids were turning up to school not developmentally ready. And there's a whole range of reasons why this has happened. School shutdowns were a factor, but quite frankly, parents didn't really know how to support their children over this period, and they're desperate to look after them and to get them ready for school, but many just don't know what that means.
Alice, let me just get back to you on that, and then we'll go to you, Leon. Why do you think that is? I mean, do we assume that people automatically will know once they have a child what is needed to prepare that child for school that they go to when they're 4 or 5? Do we assume people understand the kind of education and milestones that their children need to reach in those first years of life? I mean, why are there so many children who seem to be living with parents who seemingly just put them in front of the screen all day long for about 4 years before they go to school?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we assume so much from parents. Parents, they're taking on the biggest job in the world, and yet we don't really give them any training. We give teachers a lot of training, but parents are really left to figure it out for themselves. And some can do that, but we really have written out the role of parents in education. And it's not because parents don't want to play this role. In fact, over the pandemic, charities that work with parents and offer them support and training for helping them to reach the developmental age saw that their demand hiked. One charity that we work with called Triple P saw demand spiral by about tripling their rates. So there's a lot of demand for this, but really we don't put the infrastructure in place to support parents to know what they need to do.
Leon, if I can come to you. You see, I don't think we need infrastructure in place. I think what happened in the last 2 years is that grandparents were separated from new parents. And what I learned of how raising children was my mum and my mother-in-law and even my dad and my father-in-law. They pass down this knowledge when you have a child, and it's often the granny and pass it. That's what we did, isn't it? We divided families, we split them apart, and we left these poor young parents to fend for themselves.
Yeah, there definitely is a case there in terms of the breakdown of the family, and obviously being close to family with people being priced out of living near their family and obviously taking work opportunities that are abroad. Yeah, it is a big problem that it has manifested. But one of the things about the report to remember is the report was actually on a very much wider issue around education. How we can get parents better involved in the education of the children was just one small thing. And that part about names is an anecdote that one headed teacher said. And actually, if you go to any school across the country, you'll find hundreds of stories like that. You have to remember that schools not only educate people, but they save people. And so the real focus in terms of helping the schools, help the communities, is also just allowing them to do what they do and save people and help them in that way. So I agree with you entirely. It's just, and it was curtailed by the pandemic, but we've been doing that in society for about 30, 40 years in housing pricing increases and making people move to different areas. So it's not just about the pandemic. It's exacerbated by the pandemic, but it's not just about the pandemic.
Yeah, you're a former head teacher. We reported yesterday that the government plans to bring in a policy, basically, where teachers from all around the world can come to the UK, and I think it was in English schools, teach in English schools without necessarily having to go through the full qualifications that they would need from England. What would you make of a policy like that as a way of increasing the supply of teachers?
We definitely need more teachers because of remote working and the options now available to working mothers as well, who now don't have to look at school as the only option. It was the best option previously for them in a lot of cases. We do need to do a lot more with teacher recruitment, but that's just, we've tried this a couple of times before. We've tried it with qualified teachers. We already allow non-qualified teachers in academies and private schools. So it's not, I think there's about 60,000 of a workforce of 440,000. So it's not going to solve the problem, because the problem that you have is that it's not joined up within society and people don't want to become teachers. People want to leave teaching. So unless you change schools, it doesn't matter how many people you bring to the door, those people aren't going to stay. And that's our problem right now. It's not that people don't want to be teachers, it's they get into schools and go, I don't want to do this. And that's a very different problem than finding people who want to change and affect the lives of young people.
But Alice, to get back to our viewers' question, though, this is about before the children have started school, when they've never met a teacher at that point. And they are arriving without basic skills, basic human skills. And yet there's never been so much parenting advice and information available online. We can pick up our phone and find this. Has something fundamentally gone wrong with parents? Are they getting lazier?
So you're right, there is so much information out there. In fact, with the internet, there's so many different options for where you can start finding resources. The difficulty is that parents in the most disadvantaged communities often struggle to navigate all that information that exists. So while there is a lot of information, disadvantaged parents tend to be the ones who struggle to find the right resources and often don't have the time themselves to go through that in depth. So it's not necessarily just about quantum, it's about whether or not we're making sure the parents who need that support get it.
Well, Leon Hady, former head teacher and founder and CEO of Guide Education, and Alice Wilcock, head of education policy at the Centre for Social Justice. Thank you so much for discussing this issue with us this morning. I think
you've got a little one.
I have got a little one, and I mean, she's. I think all parents say this, but she's very clever. I take great pride in that.
Oh, mine aren't.
Okay. But when she turned up to nursery and school, she's always been, very ready to have...
But was that partly because your mum is very involved with helping you?
It is, but it's also... I think what you said there about some parents being lazy, see, I don't think that's a harsh thing to say at all. And I know we shouldn't pass judgment in that way, and it's seen as kind of controversial and taboo. But I'm going to say it, some parents are incredibly lazy when it comes to raising their children. And that is the truth. That's why you see these kids turning up and they can't pick up a pen and write their name properly because all they know how to do is click on an iPad all day long. Some parents are lazy. And yes, I appreciate that. That is often because of socioeconomic circumstances. They weren't raised with a lot of money themselves, perhaps. But, you have a choice when it comes to raising children.
And you know what I think it is as well, Mercy? Sometimes it's laziness, no doubt about it. It's much easier to just make your kid a tech zombie and sit them in front of the iPad for the day. But I think also a lot of young parents lack confidence. They lack confidence to know, should they be drinking out of a cup at 4? I don't know. Should I just say yes to everything? We've got this kind of mindset now that I think you must be worried about your child's mental health, and so they're not allowed to cry, and you have to say yes to everything. And I do feel for parents. Yeah. I do, because it is the hardest job we do. We were talking about it before we came on air.
It is, absolutely.
This is easy compared to raising children.
What, do you consider yourself a disciplinarian a bit when it comes to your children? Because
they hate me.
Yeah, and you know what? I'd be worried if, your children thought you were a soft touch, because as soon as children think you're a soft touch, they will try and get away with anything, and then they take that attitude to school, and then that's why we have classes which have a lot of misbehaving in them. So I think people actually need to be taught to just say no, to be honest.
Say no. I know it's hard, and I have my mum to thank for this as well, because she was the one who would give me confidence to say, you can say no to your children, especially when it comes to diet, and their teeth are all falling out, and they're all obsessed with apps and things, but
Yeah, let us know what you think. Those are our views, GBViews at gbnews.uk. But after the break, a more serious topic, which is close to many of your hearts, assisted dying. Very tricky moral question. Is assisted dying with dignity, or actually should we never legalise it at all? We'll discuss that after this weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The heat is building during the next few days, expected to peak on Friday. Today is fine for most with some warm sunshine. Cloudier conditions for the far northwest, northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland seeing the impact from this cold front. That's bringing some cloud and showery rain. Meanwhile, high pressure elsewhere is bringing a lot of sunshine and increasingly high temperatures, those temperatures climbing day by day over the next few days. So plenty of sunshine there for England, for Wales, some haziness to the sunshine for North Wales and Northern England, but the thicker cloud reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, and some outbreaks of mainly showery rain for western parts of Northern Ireland, the northwest of Scotland and the Northern Isles. Cooler here, but temperatures climbing mid to high 20s elsewhere, 28 Celsius the high there for London and the home counties. Into the evening, and it stays clear across England and Wales, but temperatures remain relatively high. A warmer night to come compared to recent nights. Cloudy spells for the far north of England, for Scotland and for Northern Ireland, and some outbreaks of rain for the far northwest of Scotland. 10 Celsius in the north and northwest. I think we're looking at 13 or 14 Celsius in places across England and Wales, where it will be another bright start and a warmer start compared to this morning. Plenty of sunshine then to come. Some haziness again as high cloud drifts through, especially for northern areas, and for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A few showers will break out, mainly to the north of the Central Belt and for the far west of Northern Ireland. But temperatures are rising, low 20s for northern and eastern Scotland, and low to mid-20s widely elsewhere, with 29 or even 30 Celsius expected for London or just to the north of the capital. Into the evening, and areas of cloud and rain increasingly affect Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Some heavy rain for western Scotland, and that will stick around in the far northwest on Friday. But elsewhere, it's hot, it's sunny, and temperatures really peaking on Friday. 34 Celsius possible before a thundery breakdown this weekend.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11:24 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Now, for our second viewer-led topic this hour, a number of you wanted us to discuss assisted dying. For example, we received this email from GB News viewer Jean, and she says, would you care to talk about assisted dying? Please check it out. Some of the stories would break your heart, and nobody cares to discuss this topic. Well, we do not mind.
Yes, well, assisted dying, also known as assisted suicide or euthanasia, is the practice of helping someone end their life. The term usually refers to physician-assisted suicide, where a healthcare provider helps end someone's life by, for example, writing a prescription for a fatal dose of drugs.
It is currently illegal in the United Kingdom to help someone with suicide, but bills attempting to legalise it have been tabled in the past in both the UK and devolved governments.
Yes, none have yet passed, though. But is it time to reconsider this question and legalise assisted dying? Well, to answer that, we're joined now by Ed Rennie, who's a Catholic political commentator, joins us in the studio, and Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain, who is the chair of the Religious Alliance for Dignity in Dying. Thank you both for joining us. Look, let's start with you, Ed. What do you think about assisted dying? Because lots of people will be in two minds about this, won't they? Because on one hand, nobody wants, life is precious and it should be clung on to for as long as possible, some would say. But then there isn't dignity for many people in their final days. What's your take?
Well, I think dying does occasionally, and therefore in a large population, involve suffering. Suffering itself is not undignified. We have a wonderful hospice care movement in this country to help alleviate suffering when people are dying. And that's the most important thing, whether that suffering is psychological or physical pain or psychological trauma or anything like that, then you need good services to help you through that. You need your family supporting you, and you need the hospice movement to come in when there is family lacking. And it's really important that we don't, as a society, move to a situation where killing someone or suicide is the answer to suffering, because we can see in other countries where they've done this that's where things have progressed to very surprisingly rapidly.
Why?
Well, because once you've it's not a case of so much slippery slopes or floodgates. It's once you've breached that principle that you don't kill someone or endorse suicide as a way to deal with suffering. Once you've broached that principle, it becomes very difficult to limit the circumstances in which that's done. So in Canada recently, they're now looking if you're too poor. This is coming in now.
Surely not.
No,
nothing Justin Trudeau does would surprise me.
Yeah, but this one surprised me, because normally what happens is we say with this slippery slope or these kind of floodgates arguments is what happens is that campaigners for assisted suicide, what they do is they say, well, this bill protects that, it won't allow that, it won't allow that. And then you say, but are you against that in principle? And they say, no, I'm not against it in principle. Now, I think with this poverty one in Canada, this is actually a new dimension where something that I think even campaigners for assisted suicide would say, no, I'm against that in principle.
Well, hang on a minute. If somebody is so poor that they are so depressed that they want to end their own life, they can do that anyway.
Yes, but obviously assisted suicide, which is what we're talking about, is where you're not able to do that.
Under what sort of circumstances would you do that if you were too poor?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, this is a new developing thing in Canada. Hopefully they'll stop it. It was only just over 5 years ago that the court there overruled the bit of the Constitution that said that this was illegal. The court said that was an illegitimate piece of legislation. But this is the thing, and you've also, I forget whether it's Belgium or Holland, you've also got euthanasia of young children. So if young children are feeling depressed, they can be given assistance to commit suicide. Now, obviously, part of it's the availability of the drugs. I mean, there are broadly two ways of taking someone of putting someone to death in this way. One of them uses the combination of drugs that they use when they they administer the death sentence in America, for example. And the other drugs stimulate vomiting and being sick. So you're actually given a drug to suppress that. And this can last for between 20 minutes to up to 40 minutes of actual suffering as the drugs kill you. So we've got to be really careful with this stuff.
Yes. Well, look, let's bring in Dr. Jonathan Romain, who is a rabbi. I'm assuming you've been listening keenly there to Ed's arguments. What do you have to say to what Ed has said?
It's totally bizarre, to be honest. I've never heard anything like that in my life. But let's be very clear about the terms, because I think that will help the listeners. Assisted, there are three different things. Suicide, there are people who commit suicide who might otherwise be living if they hadn't done so, if they're, I don't know, in their 40s or depressed. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about euthanasia either, which is when somebody else, the state or another person, kills someone. We're talking about assisted dying, which is when the person themselves elects to take their own life, and only if they are terminally ill, so in other words, they're dying anyway, they are mentally competent, and they're doing so of their own free will. And I'm in favour of that, as are many clergy, simply because we have seen too many people die in pain or agony. Now, Ed is right, and the one thing I did agree with him, that hospices are wonderful, but there is still a limit to what they can do. And he, well, certainly any clergy would tell you that we're constantly visiting people who are dying in pain or in agony. And now, if they want to carry on to the last possible breath, great. Let's help them, and we should do so. And maybe most people will want to do so. But there are also a lot of people who don't want to carry on and say, thank you very much, God. It's been a great life, but I really don't want to stagger on for the last 3 weeks in such agony and pain. And therefore, at the end of the day, it's their life.
That sounds entirely reasonable, Ed, does it not? Sorry, Jonathan. That sounds entirely reasonable.
Well, of course, and it's designed to. I mean, that's the point. You're not going to argue for something that doesn't sound reasonable. But the point about this is Jonathan made one point that is often made. Campaigners often propose for something that's for someone who's terminally ill. For example, there was a recent bill in the House of Lords, and other similar bills have said, well, this will only be in the last 6 months of your terminally ill life. Now, people who work with terminally ill patients know that 6 months or any other period is impossible to ascertain. You also have, in other countries where people have gone through the assisted suicide process, it has failed, and I think at least up to a third of them have then chosen that, no, I don't want to end my own life. They've actually gone through the process, it hasn't worked, and a large proportion of them have said, no, I don't want to do this, I actually want to carry on living.
But I think for most people, and presumably this is why our viewers wanted us to discuss this, I think all of us can imagine a situation in which we are not living a life that has any meaningful quality. If we are on a life support or some sort of, I guess you've got to be conscious, right, to engage in this process. That you would tell me that's one of the grey areas.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah. So I think we can all imagine a point where we would say, well, actually, I want to take control of this. I want my own bodily autonomy. I want the right to leave with dignity. I don't want my family continuing to look after me every day. I'm ready to go. I've had a great life. How is that bad?
Well, there's a couple of things that are problematic there. One is that I don't want, the phrase you put it, I don't want my family to, I don't want to be a burden on my family is often how they phrase it. Well, it isn't, because then, again, it comes to my point about you've broached that principle where suicide is the answer. So if suicide in one case can be the answer to, well, hold on, that's a burden on the family, then it changes the societal dynamic where it becomes more and more acceptable for that to be an answer where, and also it shouldn't be seen as a burden. It's part of life, of saying goodbye to your relatives as they die naturally. Now, in terms of, we can all imagine cases where we would want to go. Yes, I understand that completely.
We do have to leave it there. Look, Dr. Jonathan Romain, sorry we didn't get to you more, but we will certainly have you on again and discuss this. Obviously, it's an issue that won't go away. Thank you so much for your views on that. And, of course, in the studio was Ed Rennie, is a Catholic political commentator. You heard his views there and ours. So let's move on. And after the break, we discuss how easy it is to re-enter the workforce when you're a bit later on in life, because many of you have told us that support for older workers isn't quite there, and you actually compare it to younger people. It's much harder to get back into work. But before we discuss that, let's look at this morning's news headlines.
Good morning, it's 11:34. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The European Union has launched 2 legal proceedings against the UK after the government published legislation allowing ministers to override the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Prime Minister has downplayed the changes as not a big deal, but EU Commission Vice President Marcos Sefcovic says it's illegal and damages the trust between the EU and the UK.
There is no legal nor political justification whatsoever for unilaterally changing an international agreement. Opening the door to unilaterally changing an international agreement is a breach of international law as well. So let's call a spade a spade. This is illegal.
The Home Secretary has said she won't be deterred from sending asylum seekers to Rwanda despite a last-minute cancellation of the first deportation flight last night. The plane, which was expected to carry up to 7 migrants, was stopped when the European Court of Human Rights issued injunctions with just minutes to spare. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has expressed her surprise and disappointment, but said preparation for the next flight has already begun. Network Rail is warning the 3-day strike next week will see just 20% of services running, and they will start and finish much earlier than usual, between 7:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. Thousands of RMT union members will walk out over pay, jobs and pensions on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of June. The union has said it will be the largest industrial action in a generation. The Department for Work and Pensions says 8 million households will receive the first part of their cost of living payment on the 14th of July. A £326 instalment will be paid into the bank accounts of low-income households who are on benefits. A second portion of the £650 payment will follow in the autumn. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.209 to the dollar. The pound is 1.153 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,508.07 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, good morning. It's 11:39 and this is To The Point with Bev Turner and me, Mercy Moroki, on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Now, if you're just joining us, today is Wednesday, which is where we cover your topics. And we got this email from Lisa in Essex, and she says, please, can we discuss why middle-aged people are not getting help back into work like young people are? I took lots of time out from work to raise my family, and now I'm paying for it as I cannot get a job. The government must help us with a plan like the Kickstart scheme for the young.
Well, yeah, in our inbox we found there's a lot of you, like Lisa, in this position who are trying to return to the workforce after years away or are trying to upskill or start a second income stream in these tricky financial times. So what exactly are the options for employment for the more seasoned, more vintage worker?
Did you look at me deliberately then? You see, when they said we're going to do a piece about older people coming back to work...
You don't look a day over 25.
I was like, is this... I'm literally twice your age. Almost. I'm almost twice her age.
Right, and you look fantastic. I'd go around telling everybody if I was you, because I'd be like, look how great I look, despite being...
It's a shame we've got to do the programme, because we've been having wonderful chats while the ads have been on. But anyway...
Yes, well, Gillian Howard's an employment lawyer and joins us now to discuss this. Gillian, thank you so much for joining us. Again, look, older workers do have it tough, don't they? And that's despite the fact that actually they're probably more reliable and more committed workers than younger people.
Yes, and I'm very disappointed and saddened to read what your listener has said. I think employers must be very foolish if they're using age to discount the middle-aged or older worker. Now, age discrimination is technically unlawful, and employers have very limited excuses for justifying discriminating on grounds of age. They have to show, for example, they have a legitimate aim in recruiting younger workers rather than older workers, and that legitimate aim has to have a public interest aim. So, for example, there have been very limited successful cases. In one case, a Magic Circle law firm was able to justify the requirement that 55-year-old equity partners had to retire because the more junior lawyers were leaving, seeing at least a 10-year wait to become an equity partner. So in that case, the employer had both a legitimate aim and could show a public interest aim. But most employers would not be able to justify any form of discrimination, whether it's direct or indirect age discrimination. And as you say, most middle-aged and older workers have more experience, perhaps they have enhanced skills, they're not so likely to go out disco dancing, looking for a partner, being unreliable, perhaps in coming to work regularly. So there are many, many advantages in recruiting the middle-aged or older worker.
I couldn't agree more, Gillian. And can I just ask you then, what would your advice be as an employment lawyer for anybody watching this who is thinking, do you know what, I still have a lot to offer? What would your advice be? Look for something you've done before. Oh, I think we've lost. Have we lost Gillian? She was actually... Did you notice she was in Mallorca? I also wanted to ask what it was like in Mallorca. So that's what I want to be doing at Gillian's age. I want to be in Mallorca talking to you down the lens.
Well, now let's... thank you, Gillian,
Sorry,
anyway, for your answers there. Let's talk about now some of the other lighter stories that you have missed. We've touched on a lot of serious ones, haven't we, today? Not least euthanasia. I think I can hear Gillian. I just heard Gillian, I think. Maybe she's come back. But how's this one for you? Bins, rubbish bins, could be the new sex symbols, apparently. Yes, that's right, because as part of a campaign to get people in the city to throw away their rubbish and reduce litter on the street, the Swedish city of Malmö installed 2 trash cans, so American.
Trash cans, come on.
Rubbish.
We're not
rubbish
American.
bins. Programmed to respond to users with seductive audio messages.
That's right. So when you open the dustbin, it responds with a host of sultry phrases like, come back quickly and do that again. And, oh, yeah, right there. And that was crazy good. I didn't even want to read that out. I certainly don't want to hear a bin say it to me.
And you know,
probably going to be a gift
or something. Well, maybe it's time for the UK to do the same. We don't like dirty street. Well,
I'm going to get a bit Mary Whitehouse, but can we just keep sex out of just at least one thing, please? We've got 4 children between us. We don't want to be. I don't want to have to explain to my 11-year-old why the bin is flirting with me. Yeah. So moving on.
Yes, a man has had his favourite pair of shoes tattooed onto his feet because he's tired of paying for new ones.
So this guy, you think you've seen it all. I promise you haven't. Dean Gunther, he was the tattoo artist behind it. He said the man asked for his beloved Nike trainers to be inked onto his feet. If you're listening to this on the radio, basically it's a guy's foot, 2 feet, and he's had the outline of his trainers with the Nike swoosh and the laces and the tongue, everything all over his feet. It's gone viral on social media, racking up over 2 million views. I don't like tattoos either.
I don't mind tattoos, but my issue with this, so if he's done it because he doesn't want to buy a new pair of shoes. I mean, firstly, that tattoo looks quite expensive to me.
Yes.
So I'm sure he could have bought a few pair of shoes. But also, surely he still has to wear shoes.
You'd think so. I don't know. Have you got any tattoos?
I've got a few tattoos.
You surprised me, Mercy. I didn't think you were a tattoo girl.
Tattoos, and I won't reveal that. No, they're not anywhere cheeky. But I actually want more. I quite like it. You know.
No, you're
Would you let your son?
No.
Your son's old enough to
I've
get
told
tattoos
him.
now.
I've told my children if they don't have a tattoo by the age of 35, I'll give them £20,000.
Gosh, if my mum had told me that, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be enough. I'm saving for it. You know, I'm like at that age.
Hate them that much.
I hate
your children.
My children. No, believe me. Some days I hate the children as well. But no, I hate tattoos that much that I am blackmailing them.
Okay, good strategy. Well, look, that is it from us here at To The Point. But don't go away. Up next is the briefing and Prime Minister's questions with Gloria Day-Pierre, and we'll be back with you tomorrow.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The heat is building during the next few days, expected to peak on Friday. Today is fine for most with some warm sunshine. Cloudier conditions for the far northwest, northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland seeing the impact from this cold front. That's bringing some cloud and showery rain. Meanwhile, high pressure elsewhere is bringing a lot of sunshine and increasingly high temperatures, those temperatures climbing day by day over the next few days. So plenty of sunshine there for England, for Wales, some haziness to the sunshine for North Wales and Northern England, but the thicker cloud reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, and some outbreaks of mainly showery rain for western parts of Northern Ireland, the northwest of Scotland and the Northern Isles. Cooler here, but temperatures climbing mid to high 20s elsewhere, 28 Celsius the high there for London and the home counties. Into the evening, and it stays clear across England and Wales, but temperatures remain relatively high. A warmer night to come compared to recent nights. Cloudy spells for the far north of England, for Scotland and for Northern Ireland, and some outbreaks of rain for the far northwest of Scotland. 10 Celsius in the north and northwest. I think we're looking at 13 or 14 Celsius in places across England and Wales, where it will be another bright start and a warmer start compared to this morning. Plenty of sunshine then to come. Some haziness again as high cloud drifts through, especially for northern areas, and for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A few showers will break out, mainly to the north of the Central Belt and for the far west of Northern Ireland. But temperatures are rising, low 20s for northern and eastern Scotland and low to mid-20s widely elsewhere, with 29 or even 30 Celsius expected for London or just to the north of the capital. Into the evening, and areas of cloud and rain increasingly affect Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Some heavy rain for western Scotland, and that will stick around in the far northwest on Friday. But elsewhere, it's hot, it's sunny, and temperatures really peaking on Friday. 34 Celsius possible before a thundery breakdown this weekend.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
every morning from 6 o'clock. We'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting